Well, I watched the Avatar live-action Netflix remake. It took me 5 days to finish one episode. I'm sorry, guys, this show is not good. I mean, I'll talk about it. I think that if you like the show, fine, more power to you. I can see why there's elements why someone might like it, but I think that this show is really bad. That is after I rooted for it for a little bit, but it's just so bad. It took me like 3 sittings to get through one episode because I just was so disengaged by it. But this Avatar remake is much like all live action remakes in that they're trying so hard to just recreate shot for shot, look for look the original show, but then the things that they change, while they might seem small and while they're trying to be a little different, are things that actually make the show worse than the one that came before. But let's talk about all the details. First of all, before I get into the writing of the show, I want to talk about the costuming of this show and how it really bothers me. And there's going to be a problem when you're talking about any sort of Avatar adaptation because you have two things to compare it to. You have the original show that was a cartoon that was in the anime style, and then you have the Last Airbender movie, which is considered one of the worst movies of all time. So it's going to be difficult when you adapt it in any way because I feel that there's going to be a lot of goodwill to the show just because it isn't as bad when comparing it to the Last Airbender movie. And it's true, it's not nearly bad in any sense of the word. They can actually pronounce the characters' names right. But that still doesn't make this good or necessary, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. But let's go back to the costumes. Unfortunately, there is one thing that I can say was better in The Last Airbender. Yes, there was something better in The Last Airbender than this show, and that is the costuming, and I will defend that point. In the Avatar live-action movie that came out years ago, at least they tried to give the characters costumes that made it seem like if you took the cartoon designs of the characters and made it seem authentic, it made it seem true to real life. They looked like furs, they looked kind of dirty, the wigs actually looked a lot better. In this show, it's like they're not trying to make it look real, they're trying to make it look like the cartoon. I think the most egregious of them was the King Boomy design. He literally has like white cotton armpits or whatever. It looks like what someone would come up with if they were trying to do a cosplay of the original show and make it look like the cartoon. And that's my big problem is it all looks like cosplay, the wigs, the outfits, none of it looks real. None of it looks like what someone would actually wear in the culture that this is based off of. Obviously, it's a fictional fantasy culture, but it's based on some real life and based on, real life eras. And it doesn't look like that at all. It just took me out the entire time because it's like none of this looks real. And if you like, what's the point of doing it in live action if you're just desperately gonna try to make it look like the cartoon? And I think it was just, superficial, like get the nostalgia people on board that it looks just like the original, do something different than the last Airbender movie, but it just looks awful. And none of the characters looked right to me. The wigs were just terrible. You could tell that everyone was wearing wigs in this show. The costumes were just way too bright. They like way too much like cosplay, and that is a huge problem. It really killed my immersion in this show because none of it felt real. And it's weird because they've said so many odd things about this show, like they're trying to make it like Game of Thrones, and I'm like, well, why don't you actually make it look real if it's gonna be anything that you're trying to do on more of a realistic level? But the costume in it is one thing. It just looks terrible. The one thing that you will notice when you watch this show, and this is what I mean when I say it fails basic storytelling, is this show has absolutely no concept of show, don't tell. Like, I've never seen a show, at least a mainstream one, in a very long time that doesn't trust its audience with anything. In the beginning, and they rip off Mulan in the beginning, where you've got these soldiers who are running to escape to warn of a war, and then you've got the evil leader, and he said, and the guy who's trying to escape but was captured says, well, now they know you're coming, and the evil leader says, good. It was completely a ripoff of Mulan, but once again, the show don't tell thing that they completely throw out the window. They have the Fire Lord explicitly say what he's going to do, that he wants to be found out, and then they have the guy who he's like, the minion, not the minion, but the guy who's captured, who is asking him, he literally just repeats it. He's like, the Fire Lord says, I want them to find out that I'm coming. And the guy then 5 minutes later goes, so you want them to find out you're coming? And he goes, yes. And he reiterates his plan yet again. It's like, We just got it. And you didn't need to spell it out explicitly in the first place, but they not only spell it out explicitly once, they do it twice. But that's what the entire show is like. If you need to know how Aang feels about being the Avatar, that he feels scared, that he doesn't want the responsibility, they literally have a scene where he's talking to Appa and is just literally just says it out. I'm scared. I don't want the responsibility. I can't do this. I must go out and sulk about this because I don't want to do this. Everything in this show is like that. The emotions, the powers. In the beginning, you can see somebody earthbending or firebending, I can't remember which, and some guy has to, in case we didn't know, he has to turn to the audience and be like, oh, that person's an earthbender. They have the powers of earthbending. They do not trust the audience with anything. Everybody info dumps who they are, what powers they have, what they're feeling in the moment. It's just exposition dump as dialogue constantly, and that is the main problem of the show, is that there's no subtlety. That's another thing that makes it feel like it's not real, because people don't talk like that, and there's no way to get immersed in the story and just let yourself find out things. They're just gonna tell you constantly. And listen, I understand this problem, because when I do my own fictional work, one of the main things that worries me is, oh no, is the audience not going to get this? Is the audience not going to understand this? I have to be less vague. I have to be more explicit to make sure that nobody misunderstands this. But that is something that writers have to get over, because you need to trust your audience, or otherwise they're going to feel insulted. They're going to feel they are having their intelligence insulted, and they're not going to become immersed in the story. You have to trust them with things. But I think that is the main thing that took me out of the show, and why I just wasn't entertained by it on any level, is just the constant talking, the constant exposition dumps for everything. Now, the show is trying to be insanely accurate to the original cartoon in that all the main beats are there. It's all playing out very similarly, but it's much like the Disney live action remakes that have been talked about a lot. It's the same thing done worse. For example, this came under a lot of controversy. In the original show, Saka had a very much boys are better than girls mentality, and something that he got over, something that he was challenged on and got over very quickly. But it's because of that he and his sister Katara get into a fight in a boat, and Katara's anger over it is what releases Aang. But the show said, no, we can't show a character being sexist. We can't show that, even though Avatar: The Last Airbender is a blatantly anti-sexist show, and it shows that through having these characters who have these sort of prejudices and get over them. But they said, no, we can't have that. We can't have that now. So now it was weird because they have to change that. So Sokka, while he definitely is more accurate to the character in the original show than the Last Airbender movie, and he still has a lot of silliness to him, I felt that there was a real imbalance, because he is very immature when you find him in the original show, and that sexism was part of his immaturity. Now I felt like they didn't have a great balance, because he was like half warrior, half really immature 12-year-old. Not that he's literally 12 years old, but that he felt that way. And it's like it's like half of him is his development that he's not supposed to get yet, and the other half is where you actually do find him in this show when it starts. And it just felt really awkward to me, and they have to do like this weird thing where it isn't Katara who releases the Avatar, and it's all because they didn't want to adapt the scene where Sokka is being a little sexist. And listen, Sokka he was a teen boy. He had a boys are better than girls mentality until he was challenged on that. He wasn't harassing women at the workplace or anything. It's so ridiculous that they felt the need to change that, and therefore change elements of the first episode because of that, and change elements of Sokka's character because of that. But my goodness, this show just has so many little things. Like, it opens with the destruction of the air temple. I know a lot of people won't understand this unless you've watched the original show, but the original show is structured so you meet this character called Aang. It appears he's a very powerful character, but he is from a people who have been supposed to be wiped out for 100 years. And so there's this mystery and a discovery of what happened to his people in the first show. And all that intrigue is gone now because they choose to open it with showing his people get wiped out. And there's a big reveal in the original show where he finds out that his original master is killed by finding his skeleton, and that is a shock in the original show. But in this one, they show his master die, and they show them finding his skeleton later, and the shock isn't there because you already knew about it. And it's like these people did not understand why the original version was structured like that, and they just changed things. It seems almost arbitrarily, because this is what we see in Disney remakes as well, to make a different kind of show, but not not understanding why the original version worked. You know, there's even things like the original show had a little subtle nod to Aang having a crush on Katara, and they're developing that relationship going forward, and that's not there in this one. And the last thing I want to talk about is Zuko, because if you watch the original show for any reason, it should be for this character of Zuko and his character arc. I would say he's the most famous character from that show. And in this one, no apologies to I mean, apologize to the actor portraying him. I think he's trying. It made me really appreciate the work that the original voice actor did for Zuko, because in Zuko's original voice, you really got his entire character in just the performance. You were threatened from him from the outside, but you could tell that through all this gruffness and toughness and obsession, there was somebody who was masking a lot of insecurity and a lot of fear. But he still didn't lose how tough of a character he was and how dangerous he was. You just got so much of him just from that vocal performance. This guy, I just don't think that he's on the same level of that. It's like you just get the insecurity and the fear, and he's not intimidating whatsoever. Like there's a moment where he's supposed to snap his men to attention, and they act really scared. But I'm like, I'm not intimidated by this guy. I don't buy that they would be intimidated by him. I wonder if part of the problem is that they were writing this with too much knowledge of what the character arc that this character is supposed to go on, the redemption arc, and therefore they wrote him with all of that insecurity and fear that has been in him that was more subtle before on the surface. And that just, like, Zuko was my favorite character from the original show, and I just like, if you're not giving 1,000% with this, then I'm not gonna really like it. I didn't like it when Zuko was on screen because it was such a downgrade. And I'm not saying that to be rude to the actor. I'm just saying it is a very, very difficult role to pull off when you consider what they did in the original version, and I don't think that they did it well in this show at all. So I only got through one episode. Will I finish this show? Probably not, because I just feel like if you want this story told better, just watch the original show. And that's how I feel about remakes these days, is because remakes in Hollywood used to be about taking movies and stories that were made back before we had the technology to do them properly and remaking them to see if now that we do have the technology, we can do them better. That's why in the 80s and 70s, there were a lot of remakes of old horror films that were better than the original. Now remakes are about blind cash grabs. Like, if we just trick people to think that they're getting something new with their favorite franchise or movies by doing the same thing over again in live action, then we're going to make some money off of it. And these just do not have the creativity on their own, and they do not understand the original version either. If you wanted to do a live action version of Avatar, I would say do a movie series, take the main key points, and don't try to cram the entire original series into it. Just try to take the main points and say, how would I do this if this was in live action? What choices would I make with the costuming? What choices would I make with the characters? But they've done it twice now, and it's failed both times. And I think, like, why can't we just enjoy the original Avatar show? Or I heard that they're doing an animated movie that's going to be a sequel. Like, that sounds good. I'm tired of these live action cash grabs. But that's all I got for you guys today, and if you're interested, I'm also a filmmaker, so if you want to check out my playlist of short films, I'm working on another one right now. Thank you all for watching this review, and I will see you guys. Oh, thank you patrons again. If you want to support me on Patreon, the link is in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next time.